Welcome inside the RxMuscle studios for another episode of Iron Debate, brought to you by Species Nutrition. Visit speciesnutrition.com. I'm your host, Siddique Farooqi. We are just 6 weeks away from Olympia 2016, so a lot going on, and we're going to get right to it. Let's meet our two competitors this afternoon from Portland, Maine, the man they call the Technician, Chris Aceto. Chris, how you doing today?
I'm doing good.
You seem a little heated right now in our pre-broadcast conversation, so no doubt ready to bring it. We go to Guadalajara, Mexico, and meet the man they call Boss Number 2, John Romano. John, how you doing today?
Good, how are you? I'm raring to go. Got my brand new Julio Cesar Chavez boxing glove here, son. My greatest, newest piece of boxing memorabilia.
That is a sweet addition to the office as we come back here into the RxMuscle studios and welcome the man with the final word on all topics, Dave Palumbo. Dave, 6 weeks out now from the Olympia.
Yeah, it's crunch time now, so to speak. I always say this is, and we're going to talk about this later, so I don't want to, bring in my Levrone comments, but Levrone is just getting warmed up at 6 weeks out. If anyone knows his contest history, 6 weeks is when he starts actually working hard. So whatever you guys have seen so far, you ain't seen nothing.
And on that note, the first topic of conversation or topic of debate is going to be that of Kevin Levrone. Kevin Levrone recently coming out, posting a video addressed to his haters and to his fans. And as Dave just said, Kevin Levrone reflecting upon the fact that we have seen nothing yet and the world is set to be shocked in about 6 weeks' time. Dave Palumbo is on record, for those that have missed it, saying that Kevin Levrone will, in fact, win the Olympia. Dave, you want to confirm that right here on the air?
Yeah, I said it. I said I think Kevin's going to win the Olympia. I do. I'm going on record. I'm putting it out there. It might be the worst prediction, but if I'm right, it'll be the greatest prediction. And I'm sure you can quote the great Lonnie Tieper. But I think that Levrone can do it. And I'll tell you why. I'll give you my opinion why if you want it right now. Because I've seen Levrone, I've worked with him before. 20 years ago I worked with him, 1996, and I've never seen a transformation of a physique in 6 weeks. Are you playing something, Johnny, now?
Johnny's got the video playing right now.
Johnny's ruining my...
Message for everyone who supports and believes in me. I love you guys.
Boom. John.
What I was going to say is that's nothing. That's Levrone's starting point. I've seen him transform. I've seen his physique go from 0 to 1,000,000. He's starting out better than he's ever been before. With 6 weeks to go, I think we're going to see at least another 8 pounds on Levrone's physique. I talk to him almost daily. I don't want to say I'm his coach. I'm not, but I give him some advice when he asks for it. And I'm telling you, people got to watch out for this guy. The only thing that's scaring me right now is Big Ramy, and we'll get to him later. But Levrone's for real.
So, again, Dave Palumbo right now, for those that have missed it, and to confirm once again, is on record saying that Kevin Levrone will win the 2016 Olympia. Dave also said months ago, or weeks ago rather, when the announcement was first made that Kevin Levrone was going to be competing at the 2016 Olympia, this was the most exciting thing that we have seen in bodybuilding in recent history. So now the question is this. Well, actually, before we go to the question, we preface it by saying that Lonnie Tieper, Lonnie a.k.a. the Swami Tieper, very well-known analyst and MC in the bodybuilding industry, said on Facebook that if Kevin Levrone wins the Olympia, that Dave Palumbo, or as he calls him, Jumbo Palumbo's prediction, will have been the boldest or best bodybuilding prediction in history. So here's the question, and John Romano will go to you on this one first. If Kevin Levrone wins, will that have been the boldest prediction in recent bodybuilding history?
Yeah, especially since I made it too, and everybody seems to forget that. I specifically said that Levrone can win this. The only one who could give him, in my estimation, is a perfectly turned out Big Ramy, who would probably be Mr. Olympia for as long as you wanted to. But I'm definitely on record, at least between Kevin and I anyway, saying that he would win the Olympia. And when I was telling him that in the van between Leon and Mexico City last October when he was down here. So, I'll give that to Dave because he's more in the he's got more outlet than I do. But I'm definitely in that camp, and I believe he's going to win.
Well, Chris, let's go to you on this one. As a longtime coach and analyst of the industry, you've seen it all. You've seen, obviously, big-time predictions when it comes to the Olympia. In your estimation, the prediction, be it Dave, be it John, be it anyone, prediction of Kevin Levrone coming back after the hiatus and winning the 2016 Olympia, is that the boldest prediction in recent bodybuilding history?
It's the boldest prediction, but there's a disconnect between what's going to happen and what the prediction is. I just I was in Vegas last week, and every year here I am since 2012. I say, hey, what about John Roden? And people are like, yeah, he sucks. And every year last year was probably the year. The last couple years, people have left the prejudging. Not people. If you watch I don't want to put in a plug, I won't do it for MD, but the Flex magazine wrap-up with Wheeler and Jay and DJ, Dennis James, after not last year's Olympia, the year before, the prejudging, they had Roden as the winner. I'm just presenting you their opinion. And last year, we did the wrap-up, and me and Dave thought that Roden was going to win the Olympia. I'll get to Kevin Levrone, but I saw Sean Roden last weekend in Vegas, and don't expect the same Sean Roden. This is the best, by far, biggest, hardest Sean Roden ever, and Kevin Levrone will not beat him. I don't know where Sean will place, but Kevin cannot beat Sean.
Why?
So, because Sean is pick a pose, and I'll tell you where. Pick a pose. Sean will beat him on every shot.
Well, how do you know that when you haven't seen Levrone?
I don't need to. I've been around 20 years, and I know when I'm speechless, and you just you do what I do now, start or repeat the same thing over and over, and ask to see the same stupid shots over. Hit the front double again, hit the side chest, hit the crunch shot.
And
I know what wacky looks like.
But you also have. But there's also...
And I've seen Jay... Listen, I've seen Jay squash... I've seen Jay, by the way, in real life, squash Kevin. So I know what Jay looks like in the hotel room. Right? And we still got 6 weeks. Kevin still has 6 weeks. Sean Roden still has 6 weeks. So, if the litmus test is winning the Olympia, he's got to get by the perennial top 3 guy the last half decade.
Well, let me jump in here real quick, because the one name that's seemingly not being mentioned or not being mentioned as a candidate for the winner's circle is the current reigning dynastic Phil Heath right now. Are we not giving Phil Heath... Again, Chris, obviously you've been around for a very long time, and you're very high on what you see right now out of Flexitron, and obviously the discussion right now is about Dave and John picking Kevin Levrone to win, but... that guy right there on the screen, reigning 5-time champion, are we not putting him back in the winner's circle? John, let's go back over to you.
As far as I'm concerned, for the last several years, Phil has been going the wrong way. So if, like I said last time on the air, in the investment business, we have a saying called the trend is your friend. You follow the trend. And Phil's trend has been going down. He has been presenting not as good a physique every year, probably for the last, 3 years. So I'm considering that trend when I make these statements. I think I don't think Phil is going to look as good this year as he did last year, which wasn't as good as he looked the year before that, which wasn't as good as the year before that. So I'm expecting a much lower caliber Phil Heath, and I'm expecting a much higher caliber Kevin Levrone, Big Ramy, Sean Roden, and those are probably going to, maybe there's another guy or two in there if I thought really hard about. I would want to include, but the battle's going to be up there, and this is going to be Phil's Olympia to lose, and he probably will.
Chris, let's go back over to you, because that is an interesting perspective, and I think that's one that's been shared across bodybuilding, that despite the fact that Phil Heath is sitting on 5 in a row Olympia titles, that he has not, that there is some left to be desired. Now, obviously, we're talking about Kevin Levrone. We're talking about the recent improvements of Big Ramy. Where do you see Phil Heath now fitting into this overall equation, going for number 6?
Well, I think if you look at Phil in 2012 and 2013, 11, 12, and 13, but 12 and 13, really, he was tremendous, and he still is tremendous. It's just that he's not as quite put together as he was in 12 and 13, meaning his waist is a little bit wider, his biceps on the front double seem like they're cartoonish, has receded. You know, he's still got the crazy shoulders and arms, but because his waist has got a little wider, for the first time, like the last 2 years prejudging, he has a, you know, people knock him on this all the time. He has a somewhat narrow-looking physique in the lineup, which is surprising because traditionally the Mr. Olympia, Coleman, Jay, Dorian, Haney, I mean, they're the broadest, biggest guys up there. And Phil has been tremendous at bamboozling us in 12 and 13 with his, you know, crazy proportions that he's wide. Last year, you know, there are times in prejudging it was like, wow, he looks smaller because his waist got wider, especially next to like standing in the lineup against Wolf, or in the front double he doesn't open up as much. So, you know, he's definitely vulnerable. You got to throw in the fact that he's got to be addedly vulnerable, that he's not receiving a check on the first every month from supplement companies. That's a lot of stress, you know, and how he handles it. You know, he might mentally be tough to just, you know, deal with it, but maybe his body doesn't follow. You know, I mean, stress is stress. You know, that's why people go to the chicken factory out in Kuwait, so that they can just sit around and have the ultimate environment to train. And when you're Mr. Olympia, and, you know, you're used to getting a six-figure check every couple months and it doesn't come in, you know, that's added stress to the prep. I just think it's not a done deal for him, because it hasn't been a done deal the last 2 years. It has not been a done deal for Phil the last 2 years. And if he regresses a little bit more, meaning his waist is a little bit wider, his pecs, right? They're good on the side chest, but they have like this weird on the front double bicep and the front lat spread, you know, droopiness to them. That's nitpicking, but that's what you do, and that's what you expect when you are the best in the world. You expect people to nitpick you because they expect perfection, and that's, you know, we did see close to perfection 12 and 13, 14 and 15, not so much. 16, you know, anything can happen.
John, you were saying?
I was saying he's narrow. He's got narrow clavicles from the front with those kind of weird pecs that Chris was just talking about. He is vulnerable, and you know, and the thing is, the guys around him have been getting better. You know, these guys are getting better. Ramy's better. Roden's better. You know, Wolf is better. These guys are better. He's going the other way. So, you know, yeah, you know, you got to knock the champ out. But if the champ looks a little dizzy, he's easier to knock out. So I'm looking at this year being a really amazing Olympia for everything that's coming to it, and the possibilities that exist for upsets, for turnovers, for just an amazing amount of competition can go on in this Olympia, even with just the first 5 places. So 3 places. So I'm looking at Phil being a guy who's got a lot to lose right now.
Well, a couple of weeks
ago, in the probability of losing it.
Well, a couple of weeks ago, we had Jerry Ward on, and I don't remember exact prediction, but he said that Kevin Levrone couldn't win because he exactly described Phil Heath's features. quoting them as 3D features, and that's what judges look at, and he felt as if he could bring that for another year. So, Dave, let's go to you for the final word, because we're talking about your prediction and John's prediction that Kevin Levrone will win the 2016 Olympia, how bold that is in the scope of recent bodybuilding predictions, but then we leave out, seemingly, the name of Phil Heath and last year's second place Dexter Jackson. So give us a compelling case why Kevin Levrone, after this hiatus, is going to leapfrog those two competitors into the winner's circle.
Here's the scenario. We got to look at the scenario from last year. Look who was second place. Dexter Jackson. When does Dexter Jackson place super high or win shows? When everyone else is off, right? Really, in reality, after prejudging, Roden should have won the Olympia. Okay, if it was over then, in my mind, Roden was the champion. They used the fact that his stomach was distended as an excuse not to give it to him, okay? So that knocked him out of the going, because he was pretty amazing last year. He was having some trouble controlling his abdomen. Maybe he put too much weight on, and he didn't really have, control over the midsection. But physique-wise, he probably was the best bodybuilder on stage. Wolf was off, right? Heath was off quite a bit last year. Who else? Ramy was not at his best. It was a bad Olympia. No one was at his best. And when no one's at their best, Dexter shines because he's always right there, ripped to the bone. He's not the biggest guy, but he's quality muscle. And he's got a great presentation. And that's how Dexter snuck in there. Truth be told, Dexter could have won the Olympia too. They threw it to Phil Heath because at the last minute he came back at the night show and looked better than Dexter. But that's it. So when I look at this lineup, I say to myself, Kevin Levrone can beat Dexter when he's at his best. He could beat Heath because Heath has not been at his best for the last 2 years. Wolf's out of the lineup. To me, the scary guy is Big Ramy because I know Chris is working with him, and if he can get him shredded to the bone, he's going to be Mr. Olympia. I don't see anyone else that's going to give Levrone a problem except for a superb Sean Roden. So in my mind, the best four guys are Roden, Levrone, Big Ramy, and Phil Heath, with Dexter lurking in the backdrop, waiting for these guys to come in out of shape, and that's a possibility. If those guys all show up off, Dexter wins. That's why it's impossible to make Olympia predictions, because we don't know how people are going to look. We're basing our decisions on the best case scenario of every athlete. And in the best case scenario of every athlete, Phil Heath repeats as Mr. Olympia. I don't think that's going to happen, though. I don't think, and like John said, the trend looks like Phil's been getting worse. When you have a narrow clavicle, and your waist gets a little bigger every year, it's really, really hard to come back better than you were the year before. Cutler had that super wide. He didn't have the smallest waist. He didn't even have a small waist. He has a wide waist, but his clavicles are so wide, his delts are so big that he always had that taper, and that's how he continued to win year after year after year. I think Phil's going to have a tough time repeating this year. If any one of those guys I mentioned comes in at their best, they may be Mr. Olympia.
So that does it for this portion of the debate as far as Kevin Levrone, Dave, John, and many others speculating or making the bold prediction that Kevin Levrone, after his long hiatus, will come back, shock the world, and win the 2016 Olympia. We now go on to our second topic of debate, and that is the man, Big Ramy, who seemingly is a topic on just about every other episode of Iron Debate. Why? Because there has been so much mystery, so much fascination, so much imagination about what Big Ramy could be. We've seen him on stage. We saw him shock the bodybuilding world at the New York Pro, and ever since then, he has been pitted as, what is he? Is he the next 10-time Mr. Olympia? Is he the next big name who's going to have a flash in a pan and then fizzle out? What is he? Well, now Big Ramy, as has been reported many times, is working with Chris Aceto, and there have been leaked pictures after leaked pictures. Well, guess what? We have one of our own. Johnny Styles is going to flash it on the screen. This one provided to us by the technician. That is Big Ramy from today. That is the recent picture. The other one that's floating around, I'm not going to mention who it's from, reports are that it's an older picture. This is updated. So you're getting a good look at Big Ramy today, 6 weeks out of the Olympia. So, Chris, we're going to go to you first on this one. Is this the best you have ever seen Big Ramy?
Well, I've never seen Big Ramy other than this year because, I was on the team, off the team, on the team, off the team. I had a poaching of sorts. So, but, according to him, he says he's better today than he is on stage last year. That's his opinion. I don't know if that's true or not. The 6 weeks, is Levrone going to get better in 6 weeks? Yeah. Is, Roden, Cedric, and Ramy going to get better in 6 weeks? Yeah. Is Dexter going to get better in 6 weeks? Yeah. Is Phil going to get better in 6 weeks? So, the jury is still out, but if you need, if a picture's worth anything, that's worth, a lot, that back double.
John, let's go to you. What do you make of what you see in this picture of Big Ramy as compared to what you've seen of him in the past?
It makes me very happy, to put it mildly. Because look, when there's in my 30 whatever years in this business, there's only been a handful of times when I've been sitting in the audience of a bodybuilding show, and some guy comes out and you just go, "Whoa!" I'm like thinking off the top of my head, Dorian, the first time he came out, that showdown between Flex Wheeler and Ronnie Coleman in '98. There's just been a few times where you looked at somebody and they were just incredible. They're mind blowing. And Big Ramy is that guy. He is the very few times, he's like the 100-year wave. He's like that. He's the 100-year bodybuilder. He's the guy that comes along every once in a while and just blows everybody out of the water. But what usually happens with a guy like that is there's always something wrong with him. And in Ramy's case, all of his amazingness was overshadowed by the fact that he wasn't in shape. And then the next year he came back, he was in worse shape. So, we're all looking for him to come in shape. And now I'm looking at these photos now thinking, fuck, man, 6 more weeks of this shit under Chris. And, I predicted a long time ago, and I'll stick to this prediction, that if Big Ramy ever pulls it together and makes it at 100%, he'll probably be Mr. Olympia for as long as he wants to be. I say that with the caveat of Kevin being in there because I think Kevin occupies the same degree of freak status today as Big Ramy does, only in a different flavor. So Big Ramy is definitely what I would consider, when you look at Mr. Olympia and you want to see a freak on all levels, size, condition, package, everything, that's him. And these pictures make me really happy because if this is 6 weeks, I'm almost worried about what it's going to look like at Olympia time.
Well, Chris, let's go back over to you, because the other phase of this conversation, when you go back to last year's Olympia, and of course there was all sorts of criticism, as again we're looking at a recent picture right now on your screen today, actually, of Big Ramy, presented to us by Chris Aceto. Last year, the topic of discussion at the Olympia weekend, was his weight. And again, whether it was 316, 317, really who knows. But in your estimation, what is the ideal weight for Big Ramy to come in at this Olympia weekend?
I've always said with Dave in the previews, in the high 80s. You can go back and play the tapes over and over and over. I've always said, I think at the press conference last year, he said he was 315. We did a wrap-up of the conference, and I said, Dexter will beat him. Dexter looks small, but his face was caved in. So that means Dexter was in shape and a lot of detail. And, you can't beat 315. Fuck, you just can't. So, I always thought high 280s, and it looks like that's where he's going to fall. 305 now. I'd like to see him leaner. He can get leaner. He needs to get leaner. And, at the end of the day, I don't think, John will tell you, Dave will tell you, the weight's important, but it's not important. He just needs to look like he's, sharpened up considerably from, let's say, last year and the year before and the year before that.
Dave, let's go over to you on this one. From what you see in this picture, which is from today, again, we talk about the other picture that's floating around of Big Ramy being an older picture. This is the most recent look. Your take on what you see, is this the best you have seen Ramy, or rather 6 weeks out of a major competition?
I believe in my heart now that Ramy is listening to what Chris is saying. And because I believe in Chris and I know Chris's talent for getting guys in shape, I have no doubt that Ramy will be his absolute best at the Olympia, which is a very dangerous thought because these guys who went up against him the last couple of years have dismissed him as being a factor because they think, Ramy can't get hard. I beat Ramy even though he was over 300 pounds on stage. Chris did tell me, he said, Ramy's got to be about 385, in the 380s to be in shape. And people are like, no way, 280s. Excuse me, 280s. Because no way he's going to be, if he's under 300, he's going to lose muscle and this and that. And I trust, Chris's decision. So to me, Ramy is very dangerous because he obviously is listening to Chris for the first time. He's getting the right advice. He's getting better and better. I almost wish we wouldn't see another picture of Ramy till the Olympia, just so that people can be completely surprised by what he brings. Now, I have to believe, out in Kuwait there, he's training, he's got, a good support system there. But it's important that he has good guidance and he doesn't listen to more than one person. Assuming that he continues to listen to Chris exclusively and doesn't get swayed by multiple people giving their advice, which always, everyone when people start looking good, everyone wants to get involved and take over from there. Assuming Ramy can stay focused on Chris Aceto and what Chris is telling him, we're going to see the best Ramy we've ever seen, and that's a very dangerous look because he's bigger than everyone else. His symmetry is better than most of those guys up there. And if his conditioning is as good as these other guys, how does the guy lose? Steve Weinberger went on record saying this guy's a future Mr. Olympia. That he doesn't say that about anyone, So to me, this could be the year that Ramy wins the Olympia. Even though I made the prediction that Levrone's going to win, I still believe that Ramy is the biggest threat.
Chris, just in terms of from the time that you began working with Big Ramy, what can you say has been sort of the biggest improvement you've seen from then to now and really what we're seeing on that screen?
Which time, Sid?
From the second chapter.
I like to harp on that, right, Dave?
Well, yeah.
Last year,
Chris, they poached. Well, Chris, Farah poached Ramy away from you last year after you started working with him in the off season, which I knew pissed you off and pissed us all off because we knew that Ramy was on a great path, and then he kind of took a nosedive and deteriorated from getting the wrong advice. Obviously, he seems like he's on a good path. Do you think he'll stick with you now? You think he's pretty sold on the idea that you have his best interest at heart?
You know what, Dave? I got everyone's best interest because as egotistical as I sound, I know how to disconnect my ego from what I do. And the fact of the matter is I don't really care. And that's why he's going to be dangerous. And, the guys I help are going to be dangerous because I don't care actually if they continue or not. I just care that when I am working with someone that they give me their best effort because it takes their best effort to get them from A to Z, not my best effort. My best effort's always going to be there. I never have to worry about that. I just need, the commitment on their end. So, and you know how people are. Some people will work with you and they'll go from, they'll progress and that's it. They'll, somebody will get their ear and they'll say, you know what, Ramy, great, you look great, but you could have been 390 instead of, 282. And, that's a possibility.
John, I wanted to bring you back in on this discussion just from the picture that you just saw, from the time that Big Ramy began working with Chris. Specifically, what is the biggest improvement that you've seen, I guess, from your analytical perspective that we've seen or we're seeing now out of Big Ramy?
Separation. I mean, he's he's definitely more separated and leaner now than I've ever seen him, even on stage. So, kind of reminds me of those old Dorian shots that he took in his underwear 3 or 4 weeks before the Olympia when he weighed 270 or whatever, giant, 280, whatever it was. He just looks amazing. His overall improvement has been obviously his condition, and he just looks better put together. It's more symmetry, I think, more stream, more flow to his physique. But it's definitely the biggest thing is obviously, and most obviously, the condition. So if I can see this, 6 weeks is an eternity, though. I mean, it can go good and it can go bad, or it can go nowhere. So I am like Dave, convinced that Ramy's listening to Chris. So there's a good synergy going. I don't know if Ramy is being faced with any kinds of outside pressures where he is over there. I mean, the story that DJ gave us last time was pretty bleak. I hope that situation isn't present now, and that he's concentrating and focusing and continuing doing what Chris is telling him to do, because whatever that is, it's working. So I think it's status quo should be maintained.
Let's go to our third topic of conversation. Again, you're watching Iron Debate on RxMuscle.com. If you're watching us on YouTube for the first time ever, hit the subscribe button below. You're not going to miss any of our shows, segments, or updates, especially now that we are entering into our Iron Road to the Olympia. All our interviews we're going to be on our YouTube channel and RxMuscle.com. Sign up at the Muscle Central Forum at RxMuscle.com. That way you'll have access to all the features of the website, including the all-important contest gallery. Let's go to the third topic, and that is, on a down note, recently two competitors passed away. Actually, this past weekend, two competitors have passed away in the form of Joanna Wilson, who passed away, I believe, at the USA Championships in Vegas, and IFBB figure pro Andy Page, an Australian pro who passed away in her sleep. So first of all, our prayers and thoughts with their families. Obviously a difficult time for them, but the question has to be asked, what or who is to blame in all this? There are mixed theories as to exactly what happened, specifically with Joanna Wilson. It's been said that she had pneumonia, she was sick entering into the competition, but again, it goes back to the general topic of advice, and the term that we've been throwing around for a year and a half now, and that is guru, the advisors who are advising competitions. And again, so now the question is, who is to blame and what can be done to avoid these situations going forward? So John Romano, I know you have some strong thoughts on this topic. Let's go to you first. Who or what is to blame in this kind of a situation?
Well, this topic is kind of interesting for me because I've had an interaction with both of these people. Paige used to train in my gym here in Guadalajara, and I used to see him almost every day. And Joanna was actually my client in the beginning of her prep. She actually contracted me to prep her for the USA. Couple of weeks, 3 or 4 weeks into it, she decided that it was better for her to work with somebody local that she could check in with personally, and I had no problem with that. I can totally understand that. Online coaching is not for everyone. Having said that, I cannot help the thought of thinking that, would Joanna be alive today, yes or no, had I continued being her coach? And I really can't answer that question, and it's a haunting question. Maybe I could have, maybe she would, maybe she wouldn't. I don't know. What I do know is that she was sick. She had pneumonia. She was being treated with antibiotics to combat the pneumonia. And this was very close to her competition. I read online a couple of posts from one guy who was helping her out. I don't think he was technically her coach, but he was an advisor. Said that Joanna never told him that she had pneumonia. She just was, kind of sick. But I mean, it's more, being a guru is more than knowing how to administer drugs and telling you how to do a diet and dialing you in for a show. You got to pay attention to outward signs of physical stress, illness, whatever. I mean, when you get dialed in for a bodybuilding show, you are if things are all done correctly, you are at the absolute end of the rope. And, your health has got to be a major consideration, because only a healthy person can survive, a real, true, dialed-in contest prep. And so if you're harboring, some kind of illness, there's no trophy, there's no pro card, there's no accolade worth your life. And this is what happens. People keep these, people keep this stuff quiet. They think they got to put their head down and battle through it. They think feeling bad is part of the deal. And to a certain extent it is. But dying is not. So if you have a legitimate illness like pneumonia, which is not, anywhere near a cold, you got to tell somebody that. And if you're on antibiotics and you're worrying about, drying out and you got a whole bunch of factors, you know what? Sit this one out. It's not worth it. And I think any coach worth what they're getting to do this would have been able to see those signs. I'm not saying I would have, because, remote is a different deal. But I think if you're paying close enough attention to your client, you should be able to know if or when they got to get pulled out of that competition, because there's just too much at stake. And I think this is what happened here. I think this was a careless misadventure where, had more information been available, had more communication been available, I really think this could have been avoided.
Again, we're talking about 2 recent deaths. That said, recently we have seen so many reports of competitors getting sick, getting ill. And again, it goes back to the question of who or what is to blame and what can be done to avoid these kind of situations. Where do you fall on this?
Well, John said something very insightful. He said only a healthy person can survive, contest prep. There's a lot of truth to that. But, listen, I've been helping people for years and years, and, I've never heard of things that I hear of, like in the last 5 years. Meaning people say, oh, is it okay if I'm using this? Percocets, Xanax, ketamine, antidepressants, Zoloft, Ambien, Adderall, Wellbutrin. Those are just things off the top of my head that honestly I've never heard of before, because what those are is medications that people use to self-medicate. Alcohol, pot. I
think we may have lost Chris. So Dave, we're going to go to you on this one. I know you had some very strong thoughts on this as well, with the topic of 2 recent deaths in the NPC and the IFBB, and what can be done to combat this going forward.
Yeah, I don't really want to throw coaches under the bus, because I know competitors don't always listen. The problem is that there's a lot of coaches, but there are a lot of coaches out there that have experience in terms of working with athletes for a number of years, but don't necessarily have the scientific background of physiology, biochemistry, understanding how the body works. So when things go wrong, they can't fix them. Okay, they only have experience. They don't understand physiologically what's going on. So I've seen, and this might not apply to this case, but it has. I've seen diuretic issues where people have sent people to the hospital multiple times. Big name gurus. Chris knows who I'm talking about. John knows who I'm talking about. I'm not going to mention names, but big name gurus have had clients time and time again going to the hospital after these shows, needing to be put on IV electrolytes because they're so dehydrated to the point of almost, having a heart attack. So there's a lot of dangerous shit going on out there, and that's why I give and I'm not trying to plug my Secrets to Becoming a Diet Guru class, but that's why I started it, because there's so many more people competing today, and there's so many more coaches, and there's so many more unqualified coaches that there's really a need for an education. There's no college out there. I'm the college at this point. So if people are interested in learning the right way to do things, it's a good course to look up and take. The next one's August 27th. You can sign up at DavePalumbo.com. But the point I'm making is that when I start seeing women dying, it's one thing when you see guys dying. Oh, those guys, they're taking all these steroids and doing crazy stuff. When I see women dropping, that's scary to me, because women are supposed to be the ones that are doing the reasonable stuff out there. The women are supposed to be the ones who are not going crazy and doing nutty drug cycles and dangerous stuff. But when I see women dropping, that tells me, okay, something that John said earlier, that people are not valuing their lives. And I can't, as a coach, help someone value their life. I told a girl this past week, and I'm not going to say who it is, don't do the show. You're not in shape. And it hurt me to say that to her, because she did put her heart and soul into the prep. She just wasn't ready, and I wasn't going to do anything nutty with her, okay, to try to get her ready in a week's time, because it's just not worth it. Okay, it's a trophy. It's a small. You're not going for the Olympia, and even if you were going for the Olympia, it's still not worth dying for. Okay, nothing's worth dying for. Okay, out there, especially nothing that's so trivial and egotistical as bodybuilding. I love bodybuilding. I'm more passionate than anyone about it. I laid it all on the line when I was out there doing the show. But when push comes to shove and your life is on the line, you take care of your health. And I'm sure Joanna was having trouble breathing, because that's what happens when you have pneumonia. Okay, you can't get air into your lungs because the lungs are filling with fluid. She should have told someone. She should have gone at least and got an chest x-ray and checked it out. Hey, I can't breathe right. I know I'm going to be dehydrating myself come showtime in a few days. Can you give me a chest x-ray? Tell me what's going on, doctor. It would have been a trip to an urgent care. That's it. And she'd probably be here today. That bothers me when I see that, because it's irresponsible. So if you're an athlete or a coach out there doing irresponsible stuff, it only takes one person's death to ruin your life, okay? As a coach, if you make one bad decision and someone dies because of that decision, because you didn't open your mouth and tell them to go to the hospital or go to an urgent care, it's not going to leave you so quickly. And if you're a competitor, think about your family, okay? You've got girlfriends, wives, husbands, kids. It's not worth it. If you don't feel right, get it checked out. I remember there was about 8 years ago, there was a kid out here on Long Island or in Connecticut who had an infection in his arm. And I've told this story before. And he didn't want to take antibiotics because he thought it was going to ruin his conditioning on stage. It got so bad they had to amputate his arm, and the guy still died because the infection became systematized. The nicest kid you'd ever met, but crazy for bodybuilding. And don't be so crazy you wind up in a coffin.
Chris, we wanted to go back over to you. You were making a point before we lost connection with you.
Sid, I was just saying that, it's a different world right now, okay? People self-medicate a lot who are getting ready for competitions. It's very hard to get ready for a bodybuilding competition. I've said it on the show. You got to be stupid, like a Brad Rowe. I mean, you could say Brad, you got to do 19 hours of high intensity cardio on no carbs, and he'd say, fuck it, I'll do it. It's a backhanded compliment. It means he's stubborn and he's driven. And then there's someone else you say, and they're a great bodybuilder. You got to do 45 minutes and you got to cut your carbs to 200. And the next thing you know, they're on perks, Xanax, pot, drinking alcohol. They take and other things that you don't know of. People take and antidepressants, Ambien. So there's a lot of factors that go into what people do that you don't know what people do. I mean, people live two lives, right? They live their lives where they're doing the cardio and they're doing the training and they report to you, and then you meet them or something and their wife tells you, oh, so glad to finally have met you because he's been smoking up a storm of pot every night, stacking it with Ambien, and he gets up in the morning and uses Adderall and does a line of Coke. And that it sounds insane, but I've met people like that. And you take a step back and you go, wow, that's crazy. You know what I mean? That's like playing Russian roulette with your body. So there are, when I hear that people died, it's hard to, you don't know who to blame this day and age. You really don't know who to blame it. And the person with pneumonia, that person could be so driven and so successful at overcoming just stresses in their lives, handicaps in their lives. They might be so crazy and determined that they're like, yeah, I can't breathe, but I'll be fine. I felt worse when I was on 50 carbs for 7 weeks straight and 2 hours of cardio a day, 3 years ago. I actually felt worse then. So, you don't always know. So it's hard to single out and say, this is what did it.
So that is going to do it for this episode of Iron Debate. Again, our thoughts and prayers with the families of Joanna Wilson and Andy Page. Actually, we have a question according to our producer, Johnny Styles. Johnny, what do we got? Oh, look at this. It's new recent technology where you can display these questions on the screen. So let's go to David Chechowitz. Question, how do you think Dallas is going to place as well as Nathan Diasha? We spoke about the top guys, but seem to forget about some of the young cats. So Dave, we'll go to you first on this one.
Dallas first, Nathan Diasha?
Well, he wants to know how we think they're going to, some of these younger, up-and-coming bodybuilders are going to place.
I think Dallas is gonna his weaknesses are gonna be displayed against the top lineup of the Olympia. I don't think he's gonna make the top 6. I think he's got a tremendous future. I think if he brings up his back in over the next year or two, I think he'll be a top 6 Olympian. I don't think he will be this year. I don't think Nathan will be this year. I think Nathan and Dallas will be in that 6, 7, and probably that 7, 8, 9, 10 spot, battling it out there. Although you never know. It's hard to tell. I just don't think Dallas has that muscle maturity yet, although he's put on a ridiculous amount of size. He's got a beautiful structure. To me, he looked vulnerable from the back, especially even next to Akeem Williams in that Chicago Pro Show. So, like I said, I think we'll see probably a 7th or 8th place for Dallas.
Chris, let's go to you back on this topic. Nathan Diasha and Dallas McCarver, that's what the question is about. But I think the broader is about some of the younger up-and-coming bodybuilders. Where do you see these two placing, and maybe someone that we're not discussing that could surprise us come Olympia weekend?
They'll. I think Dallas will crack the top 10 based on the fact that he almost cracked it last year. But I expect the lineup to be better this year. And I think Nathan is on the fence to crack the top 10. Put it this way, we don't know where Rolly's going to place, but he's surely going to be top 10. He'll never beat Rolly.
Cedric?
Oh, come on, dude, right? This is men. There's men and there's non-men. I mean, Cedric just beat Kai in the prejudging. Okay, so he's got enough muscle, right, to win the show. I mean, if he can beat Kai in prejudging in the muscularity round and beat him at night in the muscularity round, I'm just saying, those guys, he's got enough muscle to
Chris, turn off that goddamn phone.
To do anything. That's the guy calling me from. That's the Iron Addicts, Romano's friend.
CT Fletcher.
So how are they? No, how are they going to place? They may crack top 10. The Olympia is a different animal, dude. I mean, it's just different. I go back to this. I keep harping back to Sean Roden, who people don't think is a mass monster. He will out-muscle Nathan Diasha and make him look tiny. That I know. Dexter, people don't consider a mass monster. He will, he's a seasoned, and I mean his physique, body that's going to look huge next to those guys, regardless. So, granted, he was second place last year, so I think they can crack the top 10, but, this whole idea of, people talking, top 5, it's that's not going to happen. Not yet. In the future, yes, but not yet.
John, let's get a thought from you. Dallas McCarver and Nathan Diasha were the two that he asked about specifically, but do you have any other young, up-and-coming bodybuilders in this Olympia crop that we could be talking about potentially going into the top 10?
No, none. And I've seen this happen so many times. I mean, think of Trey Brewer, Evan Centopani. I'm sure I could think of a few more. Alone by themselves or when they win their pro card, they look amazing. And you think, oh my God, this guy's going to be Mr. Olympia. He's going to place, this year he'll be the top 5. He's going to upset everything. And then they come in and they don't even make the top 10. When you see them next to, seasoned pros, you look at these guys and say, man, like Chris just said, not yet, someday, but not right now. You're not going to bust out of nobody is there hasn't been a bodybuilder invented yet that's going to bust out of his pro card and make his pro debut and finish as Mr. Olympia. It's just, I mean, we've seen so few guys come out of the woodwork and do that. Keith was one of them. Dorian was one of them. But think of them. I mean, how many can you think of since 1960? Young guys who have come out of nowhere, won their pro card, and then dominated the Olympia stage. It just doesn't happen. So, like Chris said, these guys have got potential. But they gotta bust their chops, man. They gotta get in there and they gotta learn the ropes. They gotta mature and they gotta earn their stripes.
We'll take one more question from the YouTube chat. Again, if you're watching us for the first time on YouTube, subscribe below and you're not gonna miss any of these shows. Let's go back. Look at David Chechowicz again. Which place would take recent winner of the Open USA if he would have competed in the Olympia? Sorry, I guess he's talking about Rashid Oldacre.
Yeah. Well, I guess I can comment on this. Rashid is a great bodybuilder, and he will be a great future bodybuilder. He would not make the top 6 at the Olympia. He doesn't have that seasoned muscle maturity that some of these other guys have. I think he could be the top 10. Just because he's got the size and mass, but he doesn't have the polish yet, and that's what John means by it's very hard to go from the amateurs into the pro ranks and be an impact guy at the Olympia level. That just takes seasoning. Okay, you might be able to do it in classic physique, or you might be able to do it in men's physique, not in open bodybuilding. Or 212 for that matter. It takes muscle maturity. I just want to give one final word. John, you know how we made we put out a call out there if anyone was owed money by Steve Bleckman to contact us? Well, I got an email from a guy from a very good source that tells me that Ron Harris, who's the main writer of Muscular Development, is owed over $100,000 from Muscular Development Steve Bleckman. Does that shock you?
Oh my God. $100,000 and he's still freaking writing? What the hell is wrong with him? Bleckman must have promised him, Arnold's Hummer or something. What the hell is he promised? Who in the world would work for free? And
Dan Ray, Charles Glass.
Charles Glass. What about the?
I wonder if McGuff is owed money.
Huh?
I wonder if Peter McGuff is owed any money.
Did Dan Ray get paid?
No, of course not.
How did Chickarillo get paid?
Well, he got paid because I brought it up on the show that he was owed money. So Bleckman probably felt like if Bob didn't get paid, Bob would hurt him politically. Because I knew for a fact Bob was leaving and was going to Dan Solomon's Digital Muscle, and then all of a sudden, after I made that bold announcement, Bleckman somehow paid him, and Bob's like, "Oh, I was never leaving," the tune changed all of a sudden.
Yeah, the tune changed.
$100,000 for the number one writer.
I want to know, as a writer, this is what I want to know, Ron. How do you screen at the beginning of the month, knowing you got to throw down 10,000 words by the end of the month, and do it knowing that you're owed a year's salary or more? How do you do that? How do you do that? You're out of. What has he promised you? And whatever it is, I guarantee you're not getting. Unbelievable.
And on that note, that does it for another episode of Iron Debate. We're going to be trying to do this every week leading into the Olympia, so you're going to want to stay tuned. Get your questions in. We will be taking more questions on the next episode. For John Romano, Chris Aceto, Dave Palumbo, and our producer Johnny Styles, I'm Siddique Farooqi. We'll see you next week.